Hello, everybody. We're back with the Tokyo FinTech Podcast, and our guest today is Michael O'Loughlin, who's the Managing Director of Global Solutions at Token. Welcome, Michael.
Hi there. How's it going? Good to be here.
An Irishman in Berlin.
Yes, literally the Token Irishman in Berlin.
Topic today is open banking, open finance, and beyond. Michael, you've got a long career as a consultant in payments. You started at Token about 2 years ago. So tell us a little bit about yourself, your career, and how you came to make the switch.
Sure. Okay, so we'll do a whistle-stop tour. So I'm Irish, studied in the Dublin Institute of Technology after trying my hand at music and theatre and then moving on swiftly to the pub business in Germany and Belgium. I decided to listen to my parents and try and get, in their words, a real job. But to be honest, everything I did in the pub business and the theatre and the music business really kind of set me up for working in this wonderful world of banking, believe it or not. This theatre of dreams, as they might put it. And it was all pre-crisis. So this was back in 2007, January 2007, I started working in Citibank in Dublin. The CEO at the time, Aidan Brady, took a chance on me and I was brought in as Chief of Staff. So at the start, it was very much working on speech writing for him. So that kind of fitted right into my theatre mode. But very quickly into learning from scratch all about back office, middle office, front office, but primarily focused on global transaction services and global transaction banking, trade and treasury solutions. So that was kind of my grounding, my bread and butter. It was kind of under his guidance, Mr. Brady, I ended up focusing on payments and FX netting. And after that, left Citi in London and got into consulting, set up the payments practice at KPMG and worked on some very interesting government banking service set up for the UK and the Bank of England, always in the world of payments. But that was my first taste of consulting. And after just a year there, I joined a great company called CGI, where I went into, again, payments consulting, always looking at what's new, what's cutting edge, and how do you bring these large new technologies en masse to market. So I was fortunate, and I'm fortunate in everything I do, to be honest. I'm very grateful for the opportunities I've had. I got an opportunity to work on a mobile payment scheme, bringing PayM to the UK, which was kind of a unique minimum standard for all banks to play if they wanted to go into mobile payments. Then involved in account switching. It's always very much, not always the popular projects to work on, but very much banking and improving banking. And then around 2013, I read a paper I was probably late in reading it, and it was about Bitcoin. Everyone knows it. And it changed my perspective on everything. It was like as if everything I'd learned up until then, I read and just obeyed and was obedient in everything I did. And then this kind of was peer-to-peer with no middleman, this concept of Bitcoin. And it just changed how I looked at things. It didn't necessarily get me to buy into Bitcoin. I did, but I didn't necessarily stick with it the whole way. But I was certainly one of the people back in 13, 14, waving a flag, saying this is the future, almost like a Dilbert cartoon. And after a few years in London doing that, I moved to New York with my wife. I now have 3 daughters. We're now living in Berlin. So you get around in global payments, a lot of global travel. In 2015, I met a man called Steve Kirsch. To say people have profound impacts on your life, just like Aidan Brady all those years ago in Citibank. Steve Kirsch, it turns out he was a serial entrepreneur and very well known in the tech industry. He was frustrated with much of the banking industry and wanted to make some changes. And just by chance, I got to meet this guy. And we had a great chat about the future of banking and where it was going. To be honest, I may have been a bit arrogant in how I started the conversation, thinking I knew it all. I probably listed off everything I just listed off to you. He just kept challenging me on why we bank the way we bank and why we move money the way we move money. And I didn't have all the answers. And it was the first time someone had really, in quite some time, really challenged me like that. And he told me about his idea for a company called Token. I immediately signed him up as a partner with CGI, Q 2017. And I left my great job in CGI and went 2 feet first. So yeah, coming up to 3 years now with the company. And that company is, if you want to talk about it now, but the company Token, it's an open banking platform. The concept was, we have the technology, but we were looking for a problem. He had created Steve and his team, small little core team, Steve and Martin Nelson as well. They'd created this technology that was looking for a problem. And then along came PSD2. And the minute that happened, I realized we have the problem. I have to leave my job. I've got to join these guys. This is going to change the world. And to a certain extent, open banking or open finance, I'm not sure if it needs to be defined here, but if you're listening to a podcast like this, I think you have an idea of what it's all about. The concept of PSD2 was that banks would be compelled to and mandated to open themselves up to third parties. That had never been done before, meaning if I go online and I can tell Amazon that they have the full rights to go in and look at my bank account and draw funds down, as long as they can show that it's been authenticated by me and it's authorized and they are authorized to do so. But that technology didn't exist. And with Token, you were able to do this. And suddenly there was a regulation called PSD2 saying it was like as if we wrote the regulation. It was like a godsend. So after only a few months in the company, despite working with them beforehand, getting set up and so far, I went and spoke to my wife and I said, I think I can't drive the bus from the back seat anymore from New York, where my wife is from and where the kids were growing up. I said, I think we need to go to Europe. Lucky for me, I have an awesome wife, and she just said, let's go on the adventure. As you can probably hear in my voice, Token and this industry just energizes me. We have an amazing team, and there's some wonderful fintechs out there and some, really enthusiastic individuals, but also groups out there as a result. I mean, you're part of this fintech network, and it just seems to be growing. It's almost like, I would say, a following. Just like the way cryptocurrencies have their following. I think open banking has the potential to have the same impact that the internet had on the world, insofar as right now, I think we're probably looking at open finance the way banks looked at websites, meaning it took them about 10 years to really get up and going. And right now, I think we're looking at open finance and open banking and thinking it's all about aggregation services, or it's all about seeing how much money you have in another bank account, or it's all about just simply sharing data. There's so much more to it around identity and things like that. I hear, come here, I'll stop. I've just been talking randomly, openly for quite some time, but actually I'll finish with this. We're in Berlin right now. We've an office where we began in San Francisco. We've an office in London. We now have the office in Berlin, and we're growing. We're now up to, when we met, Norbert, was just coming up on 9 months ago in the Middle East. We were then, I believe, 29 people. We're now just hitting 60 people. We've completed our Series A, which is 35 million. I'm not saying this to boast. I'm saying this because it's more, I have to pinch myself and look how far we've come. And it's nice to celebrate with a friend here on a podcast, kind of going, it's happening, And the good news is it is an ecosystem. We're really dependent on others having this success as well. So, and we're starting to see it as well. You mentioned before we got on this call about big acquisitions in this space, like Visa buying Plaid, and there are other ones as well. Tink got a high valuation. I think these are all proof points to show there's a great momentum starting now. I count myself fortunate, and our team, we all do, to be part of this movement right now.
And it's infectious, although we shouldn't maybe use this term in these times, but the enthusiasm is so that's the positive virus that comes across. You said you had the technology and were looking for a problem. PSD2, Payment Service Directive number 2, came out as the regulation that provided the framework to implement it. So you clearly were first mover in this space. Others copied it or entered the same space naturally when this regulation came out. What is the importance of being the first mover?
Maybe to backtrack, I don't think people necessarily copied Token. I think we've been quite fortunate insofar as when we went to market, we went with end-to-end connectivity. What that means is it was like creating a telephone network. We went and said, we will connect you to everybody you want to be connected to. And we'll go so far as handing you the handset as well to make the phone call. So we created a technology that takes into account more of a two-sided approach to open bank. What that means is Token's primary purpose right from the start has been third-party providers and businesses will be connected to banks, while simultaneously, on the other side, banks in the market will be connected to the market itself through a single interface, a single API. And by doing that, you'll have superior functionality. Now, our competitors, now that hasn't changed, by the way. No matter what happens, we're quite fortunate that, and many companies pivot along the way, but that message hasn't changed. One API for the world. That's the goal. And now in that, what we're saying is our competitors up until now, and look, there are many people who will become like us, and some of them will probably bypass us in specific fields. But yeah, we were trailblazers in the way we began. We're always looking over our shoulder, but also we have team members trying to look ahead to guarantee that we remain ahead of the curve. When you look at what we're doing, we're focused on the payment side. I think that's what makes us unique. Most people, when you look at open banking, open finance, are focused on the data element of it. We're focused on the connectivity side of it. We're focused on the security element of it as well. And then layered in on top of all of this, which is the future of all of payments, all of banking, all transactions done online, is identity. Payments, data, and identity. Coupling those three things with security is our unique go-to-market. Because once you connect, you start to develop this new unique propositions. And what we're trying to educate the market, it's like preaching, to be honest. It's like when you go out there and you're hoping people buy into the idea. And then now we're at the point where we've moved beyond proof of concept, beyond pilot, and even some of our competitors are being picked as data solutions. Other ones are being picked as pure play payment solutions. Other ones are creating deep diving big data. Data scientists are working for them, and they're actually trying to pull out more meaningful, feature rich data points so they can actually analyze and understand their customers more. We're trying to do the end to end. And we realized that you can't do this alone. We're probably going to need to do more partnerships with maybe some more dashboard providers to draw out more feature-rich functionality and things like that. But to your question, is there an advantage to being first mover? Yeah, of course there is. I actually use the cheesy line, the early bird catches the worm. And then a bank always throws back at us, yeah, but the second mouse gets the cheese. And what that means is it's such a cynical view, but I get it. Being a recovering banker, a recovering consultant, I look through those lenses as well. And I think Token has a few of us who look through this kind of glass half empty, glass half full, depending on the day look. And that lens is so important for a startup. I should say scale up. After doing the Series A, we now have to scale up. It's our responsibility to each other to do that now and to our clients and investors. Moving first has its advantages and disadvantages. We've had to make our own mistakes and learn from them very quickly. When I was in consulting, go and you preach basically a textbook saying fail fast. But that's really hard to do, because if I take money from an investor and they say to me, good luck, and then we know the product's not working. In a bigger organization, you almost rearrange the chairs on the Titanic and you blame someone else. That's what's generally done in a fintech. And I don't mean just fintech, in a startup. You have to check where you're at every single day. And like someone who's very spiritual, so I'm a very spiritual guy, I try to be anyway, and I pause each day and I go, am I walking towards God or away from God? And from a business perspective, I pause and I go, are we walking towards revenue or away from revenue? Are we on the right path to trailblazing to success, or trailblazing to satisfy our egos? You know, are we just getting headlines, or are we actually going to win clients over? And we're starting to realize now that the moving first advantage is actually ringing true. I mean, we made the first payments in the UK. We made the first through open banking worldwide. We did the same thing for data worldwide. That really helped us open doors. I think that's what the trailblazing has done. It's opened doors in new geographies. It gives us an air of credibility. But you need to keep having firsts. That's what we've learned. And we've had to learn the hard way in front of boardrooms of banks who are looking at these guys in t-shirts and jeans and going, come on guys, suit up and grow up, and sometimes shut up and listen to the experts. And I think we've been lucky insofar as many of our team, the team that Todd Clyde, our CEO, has assembled, are experienced individuals. And what I mean by that is we've been around the block. Many of us have been part of successful startups or have been part of this industry we're selling into. Many of us have failed before. Many of us were brand new. It's raw, you know, and I think that's the motley crew that creates the cocktail of success. And all said and done, I'm very conscious that all of this could be over in the morning. I think that gives my wife a heart attack when I talk so flippantly about this, but it could be over in the morning. I think right now, you and I are working from home. Well, you can go because there's no lockdown officially right now, but there's a new norm in our midst. And I don't think the world realizes that yet. We're in a world that's full of, we live where globalization is normal. It's normal to go online and buy something from Japan and hope that it arrives in 5 days and have a tracking number, and that just happens. We don't know at the moment, not to be fear-mongering, if that's going to be possible once the supply chain management of the world changes. There's going to be a restriction on movement. There's probably going to be a change around supply and demand of resources. It's probably going to impact the currencies used. It's probably going to impact the different channels we use as well. For me, right now, as a father of 3 and a husband, I'm concerned about that, but it's also the perfect storm for innovation. That's the flip side. That's the optimistic. That's my glass half full today. When I go down and see panic buying in the stores, maybe it won't be so full, but right now we're going to see, it's inevitable, a spike in online sales, a spike in NFC, contactless payments. And as a result of this, the subscription models that are out there around, whether it's yoga or Netflix or online shopping or your prescriptions or things like this, getting that mail to you, I think that's what's going to change. And the business models that I am guilty of going out trying to convince banks to change and change and change over the years, and basically redrawing something and putting their logo on it in the hope that this should work because what they currently have is pre-internet and this is the word digital and you stick it on. I think those days are gone. What's encouraging is transformation was underway before the crisis. We don't really know where the crisis is going right now. But honestly, I was really encouraged up until now about how the banks were mobilizing. But at the end of the day, customers want more, don't they? Customers want to know that their banks are their life. I think for me, I will love to play with the new neobank. A lot of them are our customers and our clients, and you're all great guys. But at the end of the day, the bank is the custodian of the value. The bank is the custodian of the money, the safety net, the block, the big grey building with the secure gates. I don't think I'm going to move my money into a wallet at the end of the day. I'll still have my primary bank account as the old guy. And all of this impacts what we're doing right now.
Well, you're very conservative then in what you just said last.
Yeah.
There's so much in there. Where do we start? I think one of the things when we met for the first time 9 months ago was that you're constrained in what you could do right at that moment because all the banks obviously need to be compliant first. Right? So if you get PSD2 and we met in Bahrain, which had new regulation, the first order of business is to be compliant. The vision of Token and the vision that you're evangelizing is a very different approach to finance. That is coming after compliance. Compliance first, and then we're talking about open banking. We're now talking about open finance, all the premium services that can be built on top that make the experience a much better one. So once we're over this compliance step, and now maybe with the crisis at the catalyst, perfect storm to implement that vision, isn't it?
Yeah, it's funny you talk about the compliance side of it. The one thing I was always told never to do if you want to get into a startup is get into compliance, because once you sign your clients, you're stuck with them and you can't mess up. It's not like you sell a product and you just turn off the phone. They're your partner for the entire contract and hopefully for life. Compliance, there are new rules in town for the last few years. And last September, the cutoff was there. We naively thought that everyone would just comply. They were told they needed to. And in Europe, generally, the European Banking Association, or authority, I should say, tells you this is the way it is. You just do it. And suddenly there were different understandings of what that was in the UK, Open Banking UK, STED in France, the Berlin Group, and there were many others starting to pop up around the world as well. But now, as of today, there are 35 geographies who have mandated open banking. That's crazy, right? But it's also exciting. But what we're, and I, by the way, I was the first to go even to Bahrain and say to them, if you mandate it, you will herd the cats. Because let's face it, banks don't need to innovate. That was the attitude before. We don't need to innovate. But then if a government or a monarchy, in this case, or a central bank or a regulator actually forces them to do something, it's only human nature to be resentful of that. And as the fintech with the solution, almost handing it to people on a platter in different geographies who have been told you have to do this by this date, you were looked at not as a godsend. You were looked at with an air of resentment. You guys, now we have to do this. great. Look, we're just going to do the bare minimum and comply. That was the original attitude. Or we're going to build it ourselves and it's going to be so customer unfriendly. The user experience is going to be terrible. It's going to be 18 different screens. It's just going to be a really poor user experience. And we went to market under the premise that the story would be, I'm guilty of writing this story as well, which was, you know the rules, you comply with the rules. So basically 3 words was trying to make it catchy was comply, connect, compete. So if you know the rules and then you comply with them, then you're at a level playing field. And then in the meantime, in parallel, you can be working on the use cases, which we can allude to, but you know them. And then the connect piece, that's where we connect. We realize that that's our strength. It wasn't just helping people comply. That's a very basic thing to do. It's just a clunky, very important part of the bank. That's why people trust, because they comply. And we really focused in on the connectivity side. And we are the plumbing, I would describe it, for this new ecosystem. And it's not a sexy thing to shout from the rooftops, we're the plumbing for open banking. And when we met, I think that was my frustration, was that we were almost white labeling ourselves and putting ourselves so far in the background that we were never really going to experience the limelight that maybe my ego told me we deserved. But I realize now that we're a cog in a wheel that is very, very important to make this new marketplace work. And that's why it's also morphed from the marketing exercise that became open banking. It's almost a poor label, because banks are the side of the ecosystem that all those mandated countries built up, but they forgot there's another side that needed to be educated: the merchants, the developers, the corporates, the governments, the retailers, and of course the customer. And we were guilty of getting that wrong too. So I would say to the geographies that it's not mandated right now, that's where the real opportunity is. Yes, if it's mandated, it's kind of a case of, right, now we all need to just get creative and build on top of whatever the minimum standard is. But imagine being somewhere like the UAE or Saudi Arabia right now, or Japan up until a point. I know that there's an API standard directive written, but I think the mega banks may have that totally under control. There's no incentive for the mega banks to allow. That's the perception from the outside looking in, and from speaking to some fintechs and indeed banks in the area. Some former clients of mine have said there's no incentive to really open anything up. And even the benefits that we might talk about as being brilliant for the customer, within the bubble of the mega banks themselves, they're already actively doing things with APIs that would just confuse the customer. That's how it's spun back to the Middle East, where there's an awful lot of talk about it. There's an awful lot of investment in fintech and building out these organic solutions to build up that other side of the ecosystem to support this new wave, where Token hopefully would sit in the middle as that singular platform, singular API, to avoid this hairball where everyone builds out their own on-ramp and off-ramp. I think that's the exciting part right now. So I was out saying to the world maybe 3 years ago, compliance is not the enemy. Regulation does not stifle innovation. Maybe this revelation is happening now live on this podcast, but starting to think maybe we could try a new tack, which is maybe now's an opportunity for a new or emerging market, just to bring banks and a few large corporates together to showcase how it could be done. Maybe like Kareem in the Middle East. They have the critical mass of customers. If they went to a group of banks with the likes of a Token, or by the way, there's no agreement there, I'm just giving you an example. That's the type of model where they would need to reduce their credit card usage. And why would they need to do that? There are interchange fees associated with that. So by them saving, their customers save. And then on the back of that, banks would see more transactions and lookups, which they would in turn would be able to charge for. So there's new business models out there where if you spend 2 to 3 years working on a compliance project, the tech team you rely on to be innovative, weary and tired.
When we met, what was under the wraps at that time was what now spun out as M10 with Steve, right? So that is really your own token cryptocurrency, if I understand it correctly. Why did it have to be in a separate company?
So we have 3 main products. At the start, it was just Token. Created a smart token where you can wrap around this unique put some rules on it. Basically, if I want to send you money in the morning, the whole idea was I put a timestamp on it. I could put some rules around how you receive it, when you receive it, what are the terms, there's a private and a public key involved, and basic cryptography that we took from the best bits of Bitcoin, really, and smart contracts. And we tried to apply that. That was the technology, looking for the problem, looking. And then PSD2 came and we realized, that's what's missing. It's the secure transfer of payments and data. When we looked at that, we realized there's an identity spin in there as well. So we kept the security pipe and we started to connect the banks. Now, we realized after a few months, you can't sell that big long spiel I gave you. You need to break it up. You need to break it up into bite-sized chunks that people can digest and see quick wins and benefits along the way. The first one that was sellable was we had to package was compliance. We realized that's a product because there's a deadline, there's an urgency, and 7,000 banks in Europe need to actually comply. So we created Token Comply for PSD2 specifically. Then we created Token Connect, which was all about, with us, we give you direct connections to, I don't have the number, 3,500 banks in Europe. That was Token Connect. And also within that is aggregation. So therefore, if I log into my, for example, N26 account here in Berlin, I could also see my Deutsche Bank account, or I could see my Sparkasse account, or for the global ones, my BTMU account, or my, insert SMBC and this. So there was Token Comply, Token Connect. And then the last one was Token Bank Pay. And Token Bank Pay was one that was always there from the start. The idea that you would put an extra button at the end of your merchant checkout. So instead of paying with your credit card, you would just see a button. It could be white labeled and you just pay with a drop-down menu, recognized securely by your browser. It'll drop down showing your bank account. So we had that linked up. Therefore, it would be account to account direct transfer. Therefore, it's a win for the merchant because there's no interchange fee. And it's a win for the bank because it keeps them relevant and they're able to see what their customers are doing. So the concept came there from, if you look at this life partner story that started being told maybe 5 years ago in banking, which is banks need to become more customer centric. They've been saying this for years, but the reality is, and I'm guilty of this even to this day, I do most of my shopping on my credit card because there was no other alternative. Why? Because there was an insurance policy, basically from a liability perspective with the credit card. I want to buy my airline ticket up until recently. I probably would have put it on my credit card because it's an expensive flight and I want to claim it back, or maybe I just want to not pay for it today. But what's happening there is my day-to-day purchase started going on the credit card too, because there were more loyalty and incentives around that and rewards. But what's happening when you're doing this is your bank is actually getting no visibility of what you're doing at all. So what did they see? Michael gets paid on the 31st of March, and on the 1st of April, Amex gets paid by Michael, and that's it until the end of the month again. And maybe there's a mortgage payment, maybe there's a bill payment or something like that. But there's no day-to-day purchases visibility. And with Bank Pay, we were enabling this to actually help banks with the permission of their customers who would be incentivized by them to shop at different places, targeting them. It puts the bank back in the center without becoming just a plain utility. So that's the long spiel, but quite simply, we'll put it again. It was Token Comply, it was Token Connect, and Token Bank Pay. They were the three main ones. But like anything, if you receive funding and you have been a trailblazer up until now, or a pioneer, self-labeled, self-titled, you have to kind of carry that as an air with an air of responsibility as well, that you're going to continuously innovate. So we're fortunate enough to have a founder, Steve Kirsch, who invented the optical mouse, who was one of the pioneers writing the first protocol for email, who owned and sold one of the first internet search engines, Infoseek. So he's had quite some success along the way, and Token is on track to be that success as well. But like anything else, Todd, our CEO, said, we need to stay on message with these three core products. We need to now scale up and grow with these products. And in parallel, we need to lean on Steve. And what I mean by lean on Steve was, Steve, we need, what's the next thing? So Steve and Martin, our co-founder, actually went in with some of our engineers and we ring-fenced them and created this new concept, which was at the time very creative. We called it Token X. Simply, we hadn't an idea what it was going to become. But the idea was that it was going to become the Northern Star for open banking, something to work towards. Up until now, we kept talking about connected world, connected direct bank-to-bank account payment, a direct access for third parties to data to understand more about their customers, and in turn building up this interconnected Internet of Things, another great layer description. It all kind of comes together in that Dilbert cartoon feature I talked about before. But then M10, instead of morphing into the future of open banking, it actually became a solution in its own right, which now it's described as the digital money rail for banks that solves the world's payments problems. Quite a big statement. One important thing that it's not, because we tried many different things. It's free from cryptocurrency or blockchain. It digitizes money issuance. It works with central banks, commercial banks, by supplying the technology that tokenizes two types of fiat money to ensure, I would describe it as a safe regulatory compliance solution. So there's commercial bank money, that's M1, and then central bank money, that's M0, hence the M10, M10. It supplies banks with digital money technology to create a global instant payments network. One of the key use cases that that's focused on is very much cross-border remittances. They're doing many proof of concepts right now. They worked in our sandbox for 8 months, and we came to the agreement that, guys, this has legs to be something completely different. Todd, our CEO, the reason he's a successful CEO is he scales companies through focus, and he felt that this was going to confuse the market from our messaging. It may, in turn down the line, all come back together, but I think for right now, the right thing to do was to spin it off and not confuse the market. Hence the name M10, moving away from Token X. And right now, Steve and Martin, they've gone off and set up M10, and the Token team now has grown even more since the guys have left, and we've really doubled down on open banking. So that's the M10 story. It's an exciting story as well. It's definitely one to watch. And for me, I think the frustration when we met, that banks just didn't get it. You know, they didn't get not the M10 story, but they didn't get that now's the time to act. Now's the time to buy into the concept of open finance. Now's the time to invest in the people. And what I meant by people is banks have brilliant people. No one says that anywhere. They don't. But the great thing about banks is they have brilliant people at doing what they're supposed to do in their specific areas. They're heavily siloed. Back office doesn't always talk to middle office, doesn't talk to front office. Compliance doesn't necessarily talk to security or talk to fraud, or indeed talk to anti-money laundering or sanction screening or watch list filtering. And they're all different departments. And they're all brilliant at what they do. And often consultants have this luxury of swanning in and having an overview template from another bank where they suggest this is a better way of working. From our perspective, working with these banks and all banks, it's great to acknowledge that you know more about what you do specifically. Our solution, in our opinion, and now it's no longer just an opinion, we're seeing it work, can benefit you and make your job easier. Because the fear of fintech is that it's going to almost become this dystopian future of 1984, George Orwell, where, you know, our only job will be to feed the dogs that actually protect the robots, you know, or the machines. It doesn't have to be that way. It should really be about making the world a better place. And the better place for me, and why I'm actively working in this space, is the idea that the banks will make enough. That's great. They're profit-making institutions. It fits into this capitalist world that we live in today. Token is a profit-making company. We have to pay our shareholders, and indeed, investors need to make profit as well. I need to put bread on the table. But at the end of the day, I was frustrated as a customer with banks. Why was I frustrated? I was frustrated because I couldn't do the simple things that I wanted to do. I couldn't send money overseas. I just didn't have access to the data, my own data. I couldn't share that information seamlessly in a safe, secure way. And with us right now, we can do it. And if we can't do it, I know there's someone else working on it somewhere else. the fact that you're in Japan right now talking on Zoom, which, by the way, I've never used before, that's an innovation in itself. I was talking to my parents in Ireland just before this, assuring them that I'm healthy and I'm safe. These are all the little technology gizmos and gadgets that really benefit the world. It's not sexy stuff to go down the pub. Soon we'll be saying, do you remember pubs? But it's not sexy stuff to go down the pub and actually talk fintech with people. But I'm starting to realize there are people out there who do want to have these conversations. There are chat rooms. Do you remember chat rooms back in the 90s? There are things like this, and there are podcasts. So I'm not sure if anyone's going to listen to my sultry tones much longer, but from my perspective, this is the place to be because we're changing the world for the better. And the great news is governments are realizing that it's not just fintech, it's tech in general will impact the world as health tech, other areas of tech that are really dramatically going to change the world. My name does pop up online around crypto and advisory and things like this and opinions and things like that. But I think it's because I was there at the start. I did play in that space. My basement flooded once and I did pay from it from some Bitcoin that I sold. But I think overall, the reason I'm in open banking is because it's going to make a big impact, not just on my life, but my kids' life as well. I'd love to be part of that story. And I realized that just like Token is a cog in a wheel in this ecosystem, I'm just a cog in a wheel in Token. There's the brains of Token are the people in engineering and product and marketing and finance, and the developers and the sales team who actually convince people that we are the right people to go with. And my role is very much looking about where do we go next? It's a super team.
This extreme focus and the early separation of the startup, which is now M10 versus the scale up, is fantastic. Best practice that many startups should copy or look at as an example, because it's easy to get excited about new features, new opportunities, and get distracted. And with Token and M10, you really got the separation. As you said, Todd is focused on driving the scale up and the innovation, the next big thing coming kind of out of Steve's and Martin's brain, which is
actually, what you just said there was something that I was fearful of at the time, because it wasn't as if it was just a clear-cut decision. We were going to go one way, they were going to go another way. The fear that was there was the guys leave and then the vacuum. I'm guilty, I was like a moth to the flame meeting the mind of Steve, the Steve whisperer, Martin, who actually co-creates and makes it real. They both left. Yeah, I would describe it as a bit of a mourning period in truth for myself and indeed others, for all of us. But the reality is he's still the chairman of the business. He's still our chief innovation officer. He's still actively involved in everything that we do. But since then, and just before he left, we started to hire some really creative. I didn't know people like this existed, but we hired 3 amazing product managers, who came from different walks of life. Some more innovative, some more practical, some more engineering focused, some more marketing focused. And they in turn have built out their teams as well. So some are focused on the connectivity side, some are focused on the compliance side, some are focused on the customer pure play side of things as well. And we're also realizing that our marketing team, probably the most creative of all of us, because they find the need, I think I actually studied marketing in the Dublin Institute of Technology back in 98. I think my dad would be proud to hear me acknowledge that. I wanted to do theatre, but marketing, it was defined as creating a need that wasn't there before, creating a need. And I remember not having a mobile phone, but then everyone got mobile phones. And I guess I told myself I needed it. But what happened? They just handed them out free in college. So there was a need. And I think our marketing team is helping us realize that you have to go and create the need. You can't just wait around and hope that people will just get so frustrated with things not working. You have to go and tell them, well, there is a better way. And maybe you could apply this access to real-time loans, or go to your merchant checkout and you say, I want to buy this TV. And they go, hey, you want to pay with a credit card or do you want to pay over time? We can do that. And you can get this in real time. I mean, that's something that our marketing team working with product came up with. And now it works and it's in the market. That's exciting stuff.
It's very interesting. I looked at your LinkedIn profile, obviously, before we talked here, just to refresh my memory. But there was actually a comment from Steve on there, and that might have been from an earlier stage stage of the token journey, but it complemented you on your thought leadership, and all the presence that you have out there in the market is more than the marketing communication teams combined. And so
Yeah, I think
when you're
I
in a
think that's
smaller company and you're really out as the evangelist driving the market. Now that you're 80, I think you have a more focused role then as well.
yeah, it's funny. It's funny. He actually wrote that. Yeah, he wrote that in January on my LinkedIn. It's wow. Yeah, it's actually quite complimentary. It's nice of him to say that. Yeah, Steve is a really good friend, and he's someone I trust, and he's been a great mentor to me. Everything from coding from scratch to actually looking through his lens, which is not a business governance or indeed technology lens. It's just a so what lens. It's a different way of looking at things, and I think that's been the most beneficial thing. And the reason I still hang around here and they let me come to work, they do give me enough rope to hang myself, and certainly enough autonomy to create some magic at the same time. It's not everyone who can say to turn to their team and go, I'm packing my suitcase and I'm going to Bahrain for a while. They're like, but you just moved to Berlin. That starts with a B and ends with an N too. Are you sure this is the right place? Steve and Todd, actually, I have to give credit to Todd. Todd was like, you believe in it, let's do it. Yeah, that Bahrain piece for me was almost a turning point for us. We knew we needed to stand out from the pack. We needed to be different. I know we talked about new parallel activities. So Steve working on this new thing in the background and hoping that could be part of the product. I mean, we've many other products too in the mix. This was just one of them. And the fact that it was our founder working on it and it became something else. There are other lines of activity we have going on too. But the Bahrain one for me opened up a new corridor of activity that the hope was that we could use this as a microcosm, a platform to showcase how our two-sided ecosystem could work, not just in Europe where we started, but actually elsewhere too. And we actually use it as a proof point. And one of the things we did on the back of that, and I will go back, it was back to Steve and Todd again, credit to them. They just said, do what you do. I generally find myself in places that a lot of people don't. And we became the founding member of the MENA FinTech Association. As a result of doing that, that's opened so many doors. I mean, I'm now on the strategy board with the Arab Monetary Fund with 23 different central banks involved. And one of the biggest things for me is pinching myself and realizing, wow, how fortunate am I? I mean, I get to go to these amazingly unique places where there's an attack on your senses culturally, but also you just feel very lucky again, to be in these positions. And on the back of it, to know that your primary purpose is to bring this new exciting technology to these markets that don't necessarily have it yet. Or even if they do, they have a different interpretation of what it is. I think the learning point was to acknowledge that not everyone's going to want your flavor of what you see the technology is. And what we're realizing is that open finance is a mindset shift. It's not just the technology. And that's been my biggest learning curve from going to the Middle East, is realizing that it's all about the different pieces of the puzzle, whether it's the governments, the corporations, the central banks, the regulators, customers themselves, then the different age groups as you segmented, the millennials, the baby boomers, you keep going down again. Once you start to realize that everyone has a role to play, not just the fintechs. I think fintech is just technology company that works in finance that is small, wanting to grow up. It sounds as if I'm belittling what we do, but it's easy to be nimble when you have no red tape.
The Middle East, or with the inclusion of North Africa, I think fintech has a really important role to play for financial inclusion, right? In the markets that we live in, Germany and Japan, most people really have bank accounts, a part of the formal financial system, but there are places on this planet where having access to a bank account and to regular financial transactions is much more difficult. I think some people say that the two ways you have a personal banker, the one is you're the billionaire, right, and they treat you very well, or you really have very, very little money and you need to go to the trader in your village and they maybe extend you a loan. Everybody in the middle banks, but there are millions of people that when they could become part of the financial system, and that could really be a life changer.
I've been involved in many side projects separate to Token about helping to bank the unbanked. I was a firm believer. To a certain extent, I still am, but maybe a little disillusioned at the pace it's going. But leveraging distributed technologies such as blockchain, for example, the idea that it could be more inclusive and accessible, the idea of using cryptocurrencies to help markets and people within markets do cross-border payments for remittances cheaply to send money home. I love the idea behind this. I love the fact that Bill Gates and Melinda Gates and the Gates Foundation are heavily invested in mobile payments and banking the unbanked and making it accessible for everybody. I've always loved that. I was fortunate enough to work with a gentleman called Farhan Khwaja, who headed up this mobile payments project, who worked very closely. He was in Citibank and a mentor to me at the time. While I was very green, he took me in under his wing and he taught me all about mobile payments and changed my life really, and gave me this kind of hunger to always look at what's new and how do you make it relevant to people's lives. And he taught me all about M-Pesa and Vodafone and the work that they were doing in Kenya at the time. And I thought, wow. And what was the problem? And he said, well, there were no landline. And he said, so everyone had a mobile phone. And then he talked about how this new ecosystem just developed and they tried to replicate it in countries where they had other technologies. It just never really took off in the way it took off there. But then you look at banking the unbanked as a concept. 4 days ago, I wrote a post on LinkedIn. I just took a screenshot. $2 trillion bailout or indeed funding package for the United States, which is a noble effort. Unprecedented to think we'd be in this state. Even the United States, a country like that, would need to do that. And it's a noble effort by whatever bipartisan politics, whatever way you want to look at it. But my point around this was the way they want to actually distribute these funds, checks. And I thought to myself, it's 2020. So with that, I did what I was supposed to never do, which is send a message from my bed as everyone was still asleep. I'm supposed to be putting these rules and guidelines around technology in the bedroom and things like that. I sent off the message and then I fell back asleep. When I awoke, some people pointed out some simple facts that I wasn't aware. In the United States, over 10% of people remain unbanked. Access to a smartphone, things like that. As someone who's totally in technology, you forget about the smartphone penetration of a population, even in a first world or first world labeled country, what that means. Thinking about that and how that impacts what we're doing right now. I think as funds around UAE, Middle East, Japan, everything, people need to be reached with these government funds, be that a heavily impacted self-employed or small business, employer, employee, they're going to need to get funds. And what we were thinking was, well, why not do their identity checks through open banking? Why not do the quick onboarding to access these funds through open banking? Why not pay account-to-account transfers from the government directly into people's bank accounts through fingerprint access, which you could do, not just through Token, by the way. Some of our competitors do this too. And this is the type of thing that I think is exciting me at a time where I probably shouldn't get excited about it. But I will say it's encouraging to know that people need funds, but what's missing is the education. And right now, if you work in government, you're probably in panic mode. And I think it's time for the private sector to step up and support rather than point the finger. And I really hope the Token can be part of that solution, not just here in Germany or indeed the UK or the United States, but elsewhere too, because the technology exists. Many of our competitors have technologies that can do similar things, maybe not end to end. And it's not just open finance. You could lean on many different sectors. The one thing that I'm very wary about is not posting something whereby we're seen to be taking advantage of a situation, so we're not actively writing about this type of stuff. It's freshly happening this morning. These things are just happening. Everything is changing each day. But I do know that we have a responsibility you can't keep waving saying you're the leader without actually behaving like one. I really hope we can stand up and be counted in this time of crisis.
Great. Thank you, Michael. Fantastic conversation. Thank you.
Sure, man. One thing I will leave you with is we were thinking about what we're trying to do at Token right now. We're trying to create this connected future of banking and commerce. And we want to do that by putting a bank in every app. And if I was to leave you with anything, that's the bit. When you think Token, what are Token doing? They are putting a bank in every app. we're shaping the future of banking-enabled commerce. It's not all about cards in the future. It's about banking-enabled commerce, because that banking-enabled commerce will undoubtedly be customer-led, customer-centric. With that, I talked about autonomy in my job, autonomy in how we behave, where we're not intimidated or fearful around money. We'll just be aware, educated, and things will be a lot more transparent. I'll leave you with that. From my side, it's an exciting time to be alive.
It is, for sure.
Well, to you and your listeners, God bless. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Take care.